I have been born in America, but have been brought up with the values of my parents' distant land, India. India's Independence Day is approaching, and this time it happens to fall on the day of Sri Krishna's divine appearance, who is not only the original father of India, but also the master of all. Because Independence Day is approaching, I wanted to outline India's heart-wrenching past. I wanted to remind people of the brutality Britishers imposed on Indians, which wasn't some accidental or isolated event, but the centuries of oppression were orchestrated with precise plan and execution. In 1790, the British attacked the King of Travancore, and one of the company's officers said, quote, "I can only subdue resistance by plundering and burning villages, killing every man in them, and taking women and children as prisoners," end quote. 1806. The Vellore Mutiny happened because British rule was against traditional Indian culture. The company changed the dresses of Indian sepoy and altered Indian heritage. This became offensive to local culture, and a select few decided to call a mutiny. The British put it down with ruthless ferocity. 350 mutineers were tied together, lined up against the wall, and shot in a range of 30 yards. This happened without even a summary trial or an opportunity for the mutineers to explain themselves. No judge, no trial, no court. After a formal inquiry, 6 were blown away from the cannons, 5 were shot by firing squad, and 8 were hanged. 1857. During the mutiny, the General James George Smith Neale in Allahabad and Kanpur was particularly bloodthirsty, as so was Sir Hugh Rose in Jhansi, where some 5,000 civilians were massacred. No maudlin clemency. When Delhi was taken over by the company, savagery was pitiless. In one neighborhood alone, some 1,400 unarmed civilians were butchered. In 1872, Mallarkota, Punjab, over 65 Sikhs were blown to bits from the mouths of cannons. 1930, in the Kwanzi Bazaar, about 400 Indians were butchered, but it didn't stop there. Innumerable smaller incidents of beating, floggings, racial abuse and assaults, shootings, hangings, and oppression and transportation of Indians for a varied list of offenses speckle the bloody and disgusting history of the British colonization. But the unforgettable incident is Jallianwala Bagh. It will forever be marked as the worst massacre in Britain's history, where the British ruthlessly massacred 1,500 women and children. It was March 1919, and about 15,000 people had gathered for a festival in Jallianwala Bagh. It was a popular place, but only accessible through narrow passageways. When General Dyer learned about the meeting, he did not even seek to find out what it was about. He promptly took the detachment of armored cars and equipped with machine guns and parked his vehicles in front of the gate to the Bagh, without even ordering the crowd to disperse or issuing so much as a warning. And though it was apparent that the peaceful assembly of unarmed civilians, Dyer ordered his troops to stand behind the brick walls surrounding the Bagh to open fire from 100 meters away. The crowd of thousands of unarmed, non-violent men, women, and children had gathered peacefully in a confined space, started screaming and pressing in panic against the closed gates, but Dyer ordered to keep firing until all their ammunition was exhausted. Later, Dyer proudly noted in his journal that they had used 1,650 rounds of ammunition, wounded 1,137 people, and killed at least 400 civilians. He said, quote, "Barely a bullet was wasted," end quote. The unofficial number was much higher. Around 1,500 were killed. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre was not an act of insane frenzy, but a conscious and deliberate imposition of colonial will. Dyer was an efficient killer rather than a crazed maniac. Dyer forbade his soldiers to give any aid to the wounded. He ordered Indians to stay off the streets of Amritsar for 24 hours. He prevented relatives and friends from bringing even a cup of water to the wounded, who were writhing in agony on the ground, calling for help. After all of this, Dyer was censured by the House of Commons but promptly exonerated by the House of Lords. But he was allowed to retire on a handsome pension. Rudyard Kipling, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature, hailed Dyer as, quote, the man who saved India, end quote. The Brits ran public campaigns in Britain for funds to honor his cruelty and collected a stupendous sum of £26,317. That's worth $250,000 today. But the Bagh victims got merely 500 rupees in compensation, not even $7. Of course, this was the only publicized outrage. But what about all the wars, famines, murders, destroying of rainforests, looting the wealth, taxing the peasants, and destroying the education system, but most importantly, stealing the minds of Indians and brainwashing them about being taught by a, quote, refined, cultured country? What an irony. To hell with the Brits. May they reap the reaction of their piling ancestral crimes. They may have stolen India's wealth, but they will never steal its culture and heart. Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and happy Independence Day.